Chapter 1. A Cruel Fate. The afternoon sunlight slowly faded, casting a golden hue over the old rooftops of the village, where Isabella Carter had been born and raised. The narrow cobbled streets, the lush green fields stretching toward the horizon. Everything was as beautiful as the childhood memories she once cherished. But today Isabella had no heart to appreciate that beauty. She stood at the threshold of her life, where a single step forward would lead her into an entirely unfamiliar world, cold, ruthless, and without an escape. Her father, Thomas Carter, a frail man with deep lines etched into his face from a lifetime of hardship, sat silently in the worn-out chair of their modest wooden cottage. The small room was filled with the scent of damp wood and dying embers, a familiar smell, yet one that now only made Isabella feel suffocated. "Why must I do this?" Her voice trembled, and her clear blue eyes shone with desperation. "Father, is there no other way?" Thomas sighed heavily, his gaze weighed down as he looked at his daughter. "Isabella, you know we have no other choice." Isabella clenched her hands into fists, her nails digging into her palms, but she felt no physical pain. All she could feel was betrayal, a crushing sense of despair at being sold like a mere commodity by her own father in exchange for the family's survival. "Who is Damien Lancaster?" She let out a bitter laugh. "Do you know what people say about him, father? They whisper his name with fear. He is a monster." "Because I have no other choice, my child," Thomas interrupted, his voice hoarse. "My debt is more than just money, Isabella. If I don't repay it, we will lose everything. This house, what little we have left of your mother. And your little brother?" His voice broke. Isabella's chest tightened at the mention of her younger brother. Henry was only 8 years old, a boy with bright eyes and a warm smile, still too innocent to understand the cruelty of the world. Did she have a choice? The answer was painfully clear. No. Selling herself to a man who knew no love, a ruthless figure whom even the wealthy feared. That was the price she had to pay to protect her family. From the top floor of Lancaster and Company, Damien Lancaster stood by the window, gazing down at the vast city of London with an icy stare. The towering skyscrapers, the dazzling city lights in the night, everything lay beneath his feet. He was neither a dreamer nor a man born into wealth. He had been an unwanted child, a boy who crawled out of the darkness, clawing his way up the ladder of power through blood and ruthless decisions. And now he was about to own a woman, not for love, for his own reasons. Did she agree? Damien's voice was deep and sharp as steel. "Mr. Carter didn't give her a choice," his personal assistant Vincent replied. "She will arrive tomorrow night." A smirk curved Damien's lips, but it never reached his cold, calculating eyes. Good. He never needed a wife. But Isabella Carter was not just a bargaining chip. She was the perfect pawn in his game. A marriage not born from love, but from power, profit, and a past she knew nothing about. The sky wept on the night Isabella left her village. The carriage rattled along the dirt road, carrying her away from the home she had always known, away from her mother's memory, away from the rare moments of peace she once had. Her cloak was drenched, her long brown hair clinging to her trembling shoulders. She felt as if she were being led to her execution, her soul sold off alongside her body. When the massive iron gates of the Lancaster estate swung open, Isabella couldn't hide her astonishment. The grand castle loomed before her, its towering spires piercing the stormy sky, bathed in golden light from within. It wasn't a home, it was a kingdom of cold, merciless power, without warmth, without love. A servant escorted her inside. Each step she took echoed against the marble floors, the sound resonating through the vast halls like a solemn bell tolling her fate. She was led to a large set of doors. The servant bowed and then left. She stood there holding her breath. The doors creaked open, and she saw him. He stood in front of the grand fireplace, the flickering flames casting long shadows on the polished marble floor. A tall man, clad in an impeccable black suit. His presence was commanding, his every movement exuding authority. His gray eyes met hers. There was no warmth, no kindness, no mercy. Then he spoke, his voice a deep, slow blade slicing through the silence. "I don't care what you think. From this moment on, you belong to me." A shiver ran down Isabella's spine. Stepping into Damien Lancaster's world, she had no idea that she wasn't just sacrificing her freedom. She was about to lose her heart. Hello, Soul Stories family. I hope you're all doing well. May God bless you with love, joy, and peace. I pray your days shine bright, your burdens ease, and your dreams come true. How did our last story touch you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly value them. You're more than subscribers, you're family. Your presence means the world to me. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to become part of the Soul Stories family. Chapter 2. The Arranged Marriage. The carriage rolled along the endless cobblestone streets, carrying Isabella Carter toward the moment that would forever change her life. A loveless marriage. Her heart pounded wildly, each beat a warning bell that she was plunging into an abyss of uncertainty. Outside the window, St. James Church loomed tall, its soaring dome and vibrant stained glass windows glowing under the golden hues of the setting sun. Noble guests, dressed in elegant attire, gathered at the entrance, chatting and smiling, as if this were a joyous occasion. But for Isabella, this was nothing short of a trial, where she was about to surrender her entire life to a man she barely knew. She barely remembered stepping out of the carriage. All she knew was that the moment the door opened, her father, Thomas Carter, took her hand and squeezed it gently. "Isabella, be strong," he murmured, though she could hear the tremble in his voice. Be strong? How could she be strong when she knew her life was no longer her own? The veil draped over her face concealed her silent tears. As the music began to play, Isabella bit her lip, forcing herself to take one slow step after another toward the man waiting at the end of the aisle. He stood there, tall, powerful. Clad in a perfectly tailored black suit, Damien Lancaster watched her with those stormy gray eyes, void of emotion, void of warmth, void of anything human. No excitement, no anticipation, no tenderness. Her throat tightened. The priest's voice echoed through the grand cathedral, reciting the vows that would bind two strangers together. The crowd remained silent, watching a man and a woman who did not love each other prepare to unite their lives. Then came the moment of commitment. Damien's voice rang deep and sharp, like a blade slicing through the heavy air. "I, Damien Lancaster, take you, Isabella Carter, to be my lawful wife from this day forward, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, in wealth or in poverty." His words were firm, but there was no warmth. The priest turned to Isabella. She felt an invisible noose tightening around her neck. She wanted to scream, to run, to refuse. But her father's anxious gaze bore into her. Her little brother, Henry, sat in the back pew, blissfully unaware of the sacrifice she was making. She could not let them lose everything. Taking a shaky breath, Isabella forced the words out. "I, Isabella Carter, take you, Damien Lancaster, to be my lawful husband." Damien's grip tightened around her hand as he slid the ring onto her finger, a cold reminder of the chains now binding her. Applause filled the church, but there was no smile, no gentle embrace, only a hollow kiss pressed against her forehead. There was no love, only possession. The rain poured as their carriage rode toward Lancaster Manor. Raindrops drummed against the roof, mirroring Isabella's sinking heart. The moment she laid eyes on the monstrous estate, she felt her stomach clench. Perched atop a cliff, the manor loomed over the raging sea, battered by the violent waves. It was not a home, it was a fortress, a prison. The towering gray stone walls, covered in ivy and decay, stretched endlessly. Ancient turrets clawed at the darkened sky, casting long, haunting shadows. She had stepped into a world that did not belong to her. Inside, dim candlelight flickered against endless marble walls, casting eerie reflections of ancient oil paintings. The air smelled of aged wood, old books, and the sharp sting of salt from the sea. Damien said nothing as they entered the grand foyer. He simply gestured to the servants before turning to her. "Follow me." She obeyed in silence, climbing the vast spiral staircase toward an unknown fate. When they reached a large stone-walled chamber, Isabella's breath caught. A canopy bed, draped in white silk, stood at the center. A small fireplace crackled faintly, offering the only warmth in the freezing room. Damien removed his coat and tossed it over a chair before finally speaking. "You are still a virgin, aren't you?" Isabella flinched at his bluntness. Her cheeks burned, and she clutched the fabric of her dress as if it could shield her from his piercing gaze. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." A smirk curled on his lips, but there was no amusement in his eyes, only a strange, unreadable glint. "At least you're not a used commodity." Her nails dug into her palms. He didn't have to say it like that. Stepping closer, his gaze scanned her once more, as if appraising a possession rather than a person. "This marriage is nothing more than a transaction," Damien stated coldly. "You are my wife on paper, but never mistake this for anything else." She swallowed hard. "I understand." His voice remained as sharp as steel. "There are rules you will follow." She remained silent, but a deep unease stirred in her stomach. "First, you will not interfere in my business." Her jaw tightened. "Second, you will perform your duties as the Lady of Lancaster when in public. I do not need your love, but I will not have my wife disgrace me." Her fists clenched. "Third," Damien stepped so close that his breath ghosted over her skin, "you will never set foot past the western wing of the manor." Isabella frowned. "What's there?" His gaze darkened. "Do not ask questions you do not want the answers to." A chill ran down her spine. Without another word, he turned away. "Sleep. I will not touch you." Her heart skipped a beat. "You don't want to?" Her voice was hesitant, uncertain. Damien stilled for a brief moment, but he did not turn to face her. "This marriage is a transaction, Isabella, not love." And with that, he left the room. Isabella sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clutching the sheets. Her wedding night had ended not with passion, not with affection, but with silence in an empty room. Tears slid down her cheeks as reality crashed over her. She was Damien Lancaster's wife, but she had never felt more alone. Chapter 3. A New Life and Its Secrets. The next morning, Isabella woke up in a vast but empty room. The white canopy bed enveloped her in its soft silk, and the fireplace still crackled faintly, yet none of it could bring warmth to the cold, hollow space. She slowly pulled back the heavy blanket, a shiver running down her spine as her bare feet touched the icy stone floor. In the dim morning light, she took in the grandeur of the room, the intricately carved walls, the antique gold-frame mirror beside the vanity, and the heavy velvet drapes cascading from the towering ceiling. Everything was lavish, but it held no trace of life. Throwing on a robe, Isabella stepped out into the corridors of Lancaster Manor. The long, endless hallways stretched before her, lit only by the faint glow of oil lamps. Shadows flickered across the portraits lining the walls, their painted gazes watching her in eerie silence. She paused before a particularly large painting, an older gentleman in a stately black suit, his expression severe, his eyes cold. "That is Edgar Lancaster, Lord Damien's grandfather." The sudden voice made Isabella turn sharply. Standing behind her was Mrs. Reynolds, the manor's longtime housekeeper. Her face was unreadable. "The Lancaster family has always immortalized its members through portraits," Mrs. Reynolds continued, "but one painting was taken down." Isabella frowned. "Why?" The older woman hesitated before replying, her voice lower this time. "Some things are best forgotten, my lady." And just like that, Isabella realized, secrets were buried deep within this house. As she wandered further through the mansion, Isabella came across an old wooden door, distinctively aged compared to the rest of the manor. Her eyes widened when she saw a single name carved into its surface. "Eleanor!" A chill ran down her spine. Who was Eleanor? Her curiosity piqued, she reached for the doorknob. It was locked. Leaning in, she pressed her ear against the door. Nothing, just a deep, oppressive silence. She had an overwhelming feeling. Whatever was behind this door was being hidden on purpose. "My lady, you should not be here." The hushed voice made Isabella whirl around. A young maid, barely 18, stood behind her, her expression filled with fear. Why not? Isabella asked, keeping her voice steady. The girl hesitated, swallowing nervously. I can't say. Then who is Eleanor? Isabella pressed further. The maid shook her head quickly, stepping backward as if afraid someone might overhear. No one is allowed to speak that name, my lady. Before Isabella could respond, the girl turned and hurried away, as if fleeing from something or someone. Isabella stood there, heart pounding. Who was Eleanor? And why did the very mention of her name strike fear into the people of this house? Later that afternoon, while exploring the kitchen, Isabella overheard two maids speaking in hushed voices. Do you think Lady Eleanor would have been happy if she were still alive? Shh, do you want to lose your job? But I don't understand. Why does Lord Damien never speak of her? And why does he still stand outside her room every night? Isabella froze. Damien still visited that room. Before she could hear more, Mrs. Reynolds entered, and the conversation immediately ceased. Isabella knew one thing: she would not let this go. That night, sleep eluded Isabella. The thought of the locked room, of Eleanor's name carved into the door, of Damien standing before it every night, it consumed her. She couldn't resist the pull any longer. Slipping out of bed, she silently stepped into the darkened corridor. The air was cold. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of wood beneath her feet. As she neared the forbidden door, her breath hitched. Damien was already there. He stood in front of the door, his broad shoulders tense, his head slightly bowed. He wore a white linen shirt, the sleeves rolled up, revealing the strong lines of his forearms. The dim candlelight flickered, casting shadows across his sharp features. For the first time, Isabella saw something different in him. This was not the ruthless businessman, the cold husband, the man who always held himself in control. This was a man haunted by something far beyond her understanding. Damien lifted his hand, fingers brushing the wooden surface, his gaze distant, lost in a memory. Isabella barely dared to breathe. For a brief moment, he looked so human, so broken. Then suddenly, he sensed her presence. His entire demeanor shifted. The mask was back. What are you doing here? His voice was sharp, his expression instantly unreadable. I couldn't sleep, Isabella admitted, though her gaze remained locked on the door behind him. Who is Eleanor? The air turned ice cold. Damien stiffened. A darkness flashed through his stormy gray eyes. Do not speak that name in front of me. His voice was dangerously low. But why? Isabella pressed, stepping closer. Who was she? Why do you... Isabella! His voice cut through the silence like a whip. She flinched. He had never spoken her name like that before. Not just a warning, a plea. His fist clenched, his jaw tightened. I told you, he said, voice rough. Some things are best left untouched. This is one of them. And just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the darkened hallway. A cold draft ghosted over Isabella's skin. She looked back at the locked door, at the name engraved into the wood. She still didn't know who Eleanor was, but one thing was clear. Damien Lancaster's walls were not as impenetrable as they seemed, and Isabella was the only one close enough to break them. Chapter 4. The First Clue. A fine mist of rain clung to the towering windows of Lancaster Manor, leaving a damp sheen over the thick glass. Beyond the silence of the vast estate, only the howling wind seeping through the crevices and the soft crackle of dwindling candle flames could be heard. Isabella could not sleep. The name Eleanor echoed relentlessly in her mind, entwined with the haunting image of Damien standing before that door the night before. His eyes had not been cold, not indifferent, as they always were. What she had seen there was something deeper, something broken, something undeniable. Damien was hiding something, and Isabella was going to uncover the truth. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet making no sound against the cold marble floor as she wandered through the endless corridors of the manor. The looming portraits of Lancaster ancestors watched her as she passed, but this time she felt no fear. Her destination was clear. The library, Lancaster Manor's library, was larger than she had expected. Towering shelves lined the vast space, filled with leather-bound tomes aged by time. Ornate armchairs were positioned in secluded corners, perfect for long hours of reading. A large mahogany desk sat at the center, and to Isabella's surprise, an oil lamp still flickered faintly upon it. Someone had been here. Recently. She ran her fingers lightly across the dusty spines of books until something caught her eye. A book slightly out of place, as if hastily returned. She pulled it out. It was not a book. It was a journal. Aged brown leather, corners frayed from time, and written on the very first page. Eleanor Lancaster. Isabella's pulse quickened. This was it. This was what she had been searching for. She hurried to an armchair, flipping open the fragile pages beneath the soft golden glow of the oil lamp. The handwriting was delicate but bold, each stroke filled with quiet defiance. They think I am blind, that I am merely a foolish girl, ignorant of the world's cruelty. But I know the truth. I have seen what they do. I have seen the children taken, vanishing under the guise of charity. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. This organization is not a charity. They do not save orphans. They sell them. She turned the pages rapidly, scanning the inked words for more. I have found evidence, documents, records hidden under false names. If I can bring this to light, I can stop them. Then suddenly the writing changed. I think they know I'm on to them. A carriage followed me today. A stranger loitered outside Lancaster Manor. If anything happens to me, Damien will know what to do. And then, the pages went blank. Isabella's fingers tightened around the fragile book. Eleanor had not disappeared. She had been silenced. This was why her room was locked. This was why no one spoke of her. And this was why Damien stood before her door at night. Haunted, regretful, ashamed, just as she turned another page. A low, dangerous voice cut through the silence behind her. The confrontation. What are you doing, Isabella? She startled violently, heart slamming against her ribs. Damien stood in the doorway, towering, shadowed, watching her. Dressed in a half-unbuttoned black shirt, his sleeves rolled up to reveal the strong lines of his forearms. But what held her frozen was his gaze, a storm raging within his silver-gray eyes, fury, warning, pain. Isabella clutched the journal tightly. I found it. Her voice was steady. Damien stepped forward, swift and deliberate. With one powerful motion, he ripped the journal from her hands. You shouldn't have read this. His voice was low, rough, dangerous. But it's the truth, isn't it? Isabella challenged, meeting his eyes. Eleanor didn't disappear. She was killed. His jaw clenched. A muscle ticked at his temple. Drop this, Isabella. Damien, I just want to... I said drop it. Isabella flinched at the sudden force in his voice. Her nails bit into her palms. Why won't you tell me the truth? She demanded. Why does this house fear her name? Damien stilled. His grip tightened on the journal. Something flashed across his face. A hesitation. A moment of weakness. But then, he turned away. Go back to your room, Isabella. She didn't move. You can't keep running from this. This time, when Damien turned back to her, his eyes were a storm of raw fury and something darker. This is the last time I will warn you. His voice was lethal. You may be my wife in name, but do not mistake that for a right to interfere in matters beyond your comprehension. Isabella's throat tightened. She opened her mouth to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. She had never seen him like this before. Not just angry, but afraid. With one final glance, Damien turned, gripping the journal, and disappeared into the shadows of the manor. The unshakable truth. Isabella sat motionless, heart racing. She was no fool. Damien wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting her. But from what? One thing was certain. Eleanor Lancaster had discovered the truth, and the price of truth was death. Chapter 5. Secrets Unveiled. Rain continued to lash against the Lancaster estate like whips striking the dark, somber night. In the biting cold, Isabella remained awake. She sat on her bed, eyes tracing the intricate patterns on the ceiling, but her mind was consumed by unanswered questions. Eleanor Lancaster. The girl hadn't simply disappeared, as people claimed. Eleanor had uncovered a shocking secret, a human trafficking ring disguised as a charity organization, and it seemed she had paid the price for pursuing the truth. Damien knew. He had buried this secret for years, letting it fester in the shadows of Lancaster Manor. But why? Isabella couldn't accept this silence. She had reached the precipice of the truth, and she wasn't going to stop now. Isabella knew Damien never left room for mistakes. He controlled everything, every detail of the estate within his grasp. But even the most cautious men had moments of carelessness. Tonight was one of them. She waited until Damien left the estate at midnight. No one knew where he went, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that his office was now unguarded. Isabella stepped into the vast room, the dim glow of an oil lamp casting restless shadows on the walls. The room smelled of leather, mahogany, and something cold, just like its owner. Her fingers brushed across the desk, where neatly stacked documents rested in perfect order. Nothing suspicious. She quickly moved to the drawers. The first one was locked. Her fingers curled into a fist. That only confirmed there was something important inside. She searched the room for a key, and then inside a small wooden box on the bookshelf, she found it, a small silver key, heavy in her palm. Taking a deep breath, she inserted it into the lock and turned. Click. The drawer slid open. Inside lay an old file, its pages yellowed with time. Isabella pulled it out and placed it on the desk, her eyes scanning the contents. List of adopted children, Ashford and Lancaster Charity Fund. Her heart pounded. She flipped through the pages. Each name had a date, an address, but some had been crossed out or faded beyond recognition. And then she found a familiar name, circled in red ink. Eleanor Lancaster. A chill ran down Isabella's spine. She kept turning the pages until she found an old letter, sealed with red wax, bearing the Ashford family crest. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Damien, she's going too far. If she continues, you know what will happen. I can't protect you forever. Margaret. Fury surged through Isabella's chest. Margaret Ashford. The name had been whispered in hushed rumors before. A powerful businesswoman, the mastermind behind multiple charity foundations, but also a suspected figure in numerous mysterious disappearances. Eleanor had found the truth, and Margaret had made her disappear. Isabella barely had time to process it when a cold, low voice echoed behind her. Damien, the wrath in the dark. What the hell do you think you're doing, Isabella? His voice sliced through the air like a blade. She spun around. Damien stood there, his expression as dark as the storm outside. His gray eyes gleamed with a dangerous edge. The file in her trembling hands was impossible to hide now. I found the truth, Isabella said, her voice steady but wavering at the edges. Damien strode toward her, and before she could react, he ripped the file from her grasp. You have no right to touch this, he growled, his jaw clenched. But this is about Eleanor, Isabella burst out. She was murdered, and you know it. Damien said nothing, but his grip tightened on the file, knuckles turning white. Margaret Ashford ordered her execution, didn't she? Isabella pushed, her voice rising. And you let it happen? Shut up! His voice thundered like a storm. She flinched but refused to back down. What are you hiding, Damien? Why are you protecting the people who killed your own sister? Damien slammed the file onto the desk, his eyes ablaze with fury and something else. Pain. You don't understand anything, he roared. You think this is simple? You think uncovering a few sheets of paper will change the past? Isabella looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears but unwavering. No, I don't. But I know one thing. Eleanor fought for the truth, and you're denying it. Damien fell silent. His chest heaved, his gray eyes clouded with something distant. I tried to protect her, he rasped, but I failed. Isabella's heart clenched. Damien! He turned away, his fists tightening at his sides. You can't change what happened, he murmured, and you can't save Eleanor. But I can help you find the ones who did this to her. Isabella's voice was resolute. Damien turned back to her. For a fleeting moment, she saw something flicker in his gaze. Hope. She had reached the deepest part of him, the part that still loved Eleanor, the part that had never forgiven himself. and now she would help him right the past, no matter the cost. Chapter 6. Love Awakens. Rain pounded against the Lancaster estate, striking the earth like a relentless whip. Thunder rumbled across the pitch-black sky. Inside the cold, desolate manor, Isabella sat motionless on her bed, her mind swirling with endless thoughts. She knew she had delved too deep into Eleanor's secrets, and now Margaret Ashford had begun to suspect her. I'm in danger. But what unsettled her more than Margaret's threats was Damien. For the first time, she saw him falter. For the first time, he placed her safety above everything else. Why was he protecting her? Out of duty? To maintain the facade of their arranged marriage? Or was there something deeper forming between them? She didn't have an answer yet, but she knew one thing for certain. He wasn't the heartless monster she had once believed him to be. The next morning, Isabella was summoned to the sitting room. The moment she stepped in, she sensed the suffocating tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. Margaret Ashford sat on the velvet chair, legs crossed, her black dress hugging her tall, slender frame in pristine elegance. Her icy blue eyes pierced through Isabella as if dissecting her very thoughts. "Good morning, Isabella." Margaret smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Isabella felt Damien standing right behind her. His breathing was steady, but she could sense the restrained tension in his body. "Good morning, Lady Ashford," Isabella replied, her voice remarkably composed. Margaret tilted her head, assessing her. "Have you grown accustomed to life here?" "It's not unbearable," Isabella answered, keeping her expression neutral. Margaret's lips curled into a faint smirk, but it disappeared just as quickly. "I hear that you are quite curious." Damien's grip on her shoulder tightened, a silent warning. But Isabella didn't back down. "Isn't curiosity part of human nature?" she countered, meeting Margaret's gaze without flinching. Margaret raised an eyebrow, then slowly stood up. She stepped closer, her expensive perfume thick in the air. "But sometimes, too much curiosity can be dangerous," Margaret murmured, just loud enough for Isabella to hear. A chill ran down Isabella's spine. Margaret knew. She didn't have to spell it out. Her meaning was clear. If Isabella continued digging into Eleanor's past, there would be consequences. "Then I suppose I'll be more careful," Isabella responded, a sharp smile forming on her lips. For the first time, Margaret seemed momentarily surprised, but then she let out a soft chuckle and turned to Damien. "Keep a tight leash on your wife, Damien," Margaret said, her voice laced with meaning, "or else she might disappear, just like Eleanor." And with that, she strode out of the room, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than steel. That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. Margaret's warning echoed in her mind like a haunting curse. Near midnight, she decided to step out, hoping a walk through the dimly lit corridors would clear her head. But as she moved through the long hallway, a prickling sensation crept up her spine. She wasn't alone. Instinct stopped her in her tracks. Her heart pounded in her chest. The air felt frozen. And then, a rough hand clamped over her mouth, yanking her into the shadows. Panic surged through her. She struggled, but the man was too strong. He pinned her against the cold stone wall, his ragged breath hot against her ear. "Easy now, Lady Lancaster," the man murmured, his voice dripping with menace. "Don't fight. It'll hurt more if you do." Isabella tried to scream, but her voice was muffled. His grip tightened around her arm. She was being attacked. She thrashed violently, kicking at his legs, but he only chuckled. But before he could do anything else, bang! A deafening sound rang out, and her assailant was thrown backward. Before Isabella could even process what was happening, she saw him. Damien. His face was like stone, his gray eyes ablaze with pure, unfiltered rage. Without a word, he lunged at the attacker, landing a brutal punch that cracked through the silence like a gunshot. The man howled in pain, but Damien didn't stop. He grabbed him by the collar and drove another fist into his face. Blood splattered across the floor. Isabella gasped, her breath ragged as she watched the scene unfold in stunned silence. Damien Lancaster, the man she had once thought to be cold and indifferent, was now a beast unleashed, defending what was his. He hauled the man up, his voice a deadly growl. "If you ever touch her again, I will kill you myself." The attacker stumbled away, vanishing into the darkness. Damien turned to her, his chest heaving, his stormy eyes still burning with fury. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, though her body was still trembling. He reached out, brushing his fingers lightly against her cheek. "You got here in time," Isabella whispered, her eyes reflecting the fire in his. And then, as if something beyond their control had taken over, Damien closed the distance between them, his lips crashing onto hers in a kiss filled with raw intensity. Isabella froze for a heartbeat, but only for a heartbeat. He kissed her as if this was something he had been holding back for far too long. A desperate, searing kiss, not out of duty, not because of their arranged marriage, but because he wanted her. She could feel the tremor in his breath, the restrained storm beneath his skin, and her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break. When Damien finally pulled away, his gaze was dark and unreadable. "I shouldn't have done that," he murmured, his voice hoarse. Isabella looked at him, realizing something they had both tried to deny. "You're not a monster, Damien," she said, her voice steady. "You just don't want anyone to know that. You still have a heart." Damien didn't answer, but for the first time, he didn't turn away. For the first time, he let her see him for who he truly was. Chapter 7. The Truth Behind Eleanor's Death. The midnight rain continued to pour over Lancaster Manor, drumming against the thick glass windows with a hollow rhythm. Inside the vast estate, a single candle flickered in the library, casting faint, wavering shadows across Isabella's face, one alight with unwavering determination. She had just found something that could change everything. A tape recording. Not fragmented diary entries, not whispered rumors. This was evidence. Eleanor Lancaster had left behind her own voice, accusing the one responsible for her disappearance. And the only name spoken in her dying confession was Margaret Ashford. Isabella discovered the tape inside an old wooden box, hidden deep within a desk drawer in the library. When she lifted the lid, she almost couldn't believe her eyes. An aged cassette tape, its label scrawled in uneven handwriting. "If I disappear, listen to this tape." Her hands trembled as she placed the tape into an old player. A soft static filled the room. Then Eleanor's voice emerged, faint but resolute. "If someone is listening to this, it means I'm no longer here." Isabella's heart clenched. Margaret Ashford is not who she pretends to be. She is not a philanthropist. She is the mastermind behind a massive human trafficking ring, operating under the guise of orphan adoption charities. She doesn't save lives, she sells them. And I have proof. Isabella's grip tightened. "I've been tracking her for months. I found the names of the missing children. I have financial records proving that Margaret and her associates were paid by the buyers. I have everything needed to expose them. But I also know I'm being watched." Eleanor's voice wavered for a moment, then steadied. "Tonight I'm leaving. I can't stay here any longer. If I make it out alive, I'll take this evidence to the authorities. If I don't—" She hesitated, and for a fleeting second, Isabella could hear her rapid breathing. "Damien, if you ever hear this tape, continue what I started. Don't let her walk free. Don't let more children suffer." Then silence, nothing more. Just the echo of a voice lost to time. Isabella bit down on her lip, rage and sorrow twisting in her chest. Eleanor had everything she needed to bring Margaret down. She had been ready to fight. So why had she still vanished? There was only one answer. Margaret had struck first, and Damien had known this all along. The rain pounded harder against the windows, icy droplets streaking down the glass like silent tears. Outside, the wind howled like a mourning requiem from the past, but none of it compared to the storm raging within Isabella. She stared at the cassette in her hands, her heart heavy. This was Eleanor's final plea, a girl who had risked everything for justice, a girl silenced because she dared to stand against power. She clenched her fists, her mind consumed by one burning question. Why didn't Damien do anything? He had the truth. He knew Margaret was responsible. So why had he let it be buried in the dark? Isabella inhaled sharply. She needed answers. And this time, she wouldn't leave until Damien told her everything. Her footsteps echoed against the marble floors as she strode down the long corridor. The library door stood ajar, and inside, Damien stood motionless, gazing out at the storm through towering windows. She didn't hesitate. Why is Margaret still free? Damien didn't turn. Isabella, you don't understand what you're getting yourself into. No, Damien. Her voice was firm. You're the one who doesn't understand. I listened to Eleanor's tape. She had the evidence. She was ready to expose everything, and she died for it. But you did nothing. Slowly, Damien turned to face her, his eyes dark and unreadable. Do you really think it's that simple? Isabella threw the tape onto the desk. There is proof. There is truth. You have power, status. So why didn't you fight? Her words cut through the silence like a blade. Damien held her gaze for a long moment. Then he let out a dry, humorless laugh. You think a single tape is enough to bring Margaret down? His voice was laced with bitterness. Isabella narrowed her eyes. Are you afraid? Are you so scared of her that you won't even try? In an instant, he was in front of her, his stormy gaze burning with restrained fury. Do you know what I've been doing all these years? His voice was low, dangerous. Do you know how many times I've tried to take her down? Isabella froze. Damien continued, his tone laced with unspoken anguish. Right after Eleanor's death, I launched a war. I had evidence, witnesses. I believed I could destroy Margaret, that justice would prevail. He paused, his hands clenched into fists. But one by one, my witnesses disappeared. The documents I gathered, destroyed. The officers I trusted, bought. I went to government officials, to people in power. Do you know what they told me? He let out a bitter laugh, but his eyes held only defeat. Damien, you're playing a game you cannot win. A shiver ran down Isabella's spine. I watched as those who stood against Margaret were crushed. Their businesses collapsed overnight. Their families suffered accidents. Some were never seen again. He locked eyes with her, his voice raw. I wasn't afraid of her, but I knew that if I kept pushing, I wouldn't just lose Eleanor. I'd lose everything she fought for. Isabella's breath hitched. Damien wasn't a coward. He hadn't ignored the truth. He had fought, and he had lost. But he was still here, still standing. And now, he was protecting her. For a long moment, Isabella said nothing. Then she took a deep breath. So, are you just going to let her win? Her voice was quiet but sharp. Damien didn't answer right away. He turned back to the window, as if searching for something in the rain-soaked night. I don't know, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to beat her. But I do. She stepped closer, her fingers grazing his hand. Damien tensed but didn't pull away. Margaret thinks she silenced Eleanor, Isabella said, her voice unwavering. But she was wrong, because I'm still here, and so are you. We can finish what Eleanor started. He turned to her then, something shifting in his gaze. For the first time, there was a flicker of light in his storm-dark eyes. He shook his head, as if unable to believe her resolve. You don't understand, Isabella. Once you start this, there's no turning back. She smiled, a defiant, fearless smile. Then make sure I don't walk this path alone. Damien stared at her, seeing in her the same fire that had once burned in Eleanor. Strong, stubborn, unyielding. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone anymore. He took a deep breath, then nodded. All right, he said, his voice steady. Let's bring Margaret down. No more hesitation, no more fear. This time they wouldn't lose. Isabella clenched her fist, determination blazing in her heart. Eleanor's justice would be served, no matter the cost. Chapter 8. The Plan to Bring Down Margaret. We can't rely on Eleanor's tape alone. Damien's voice was calm but sharp as a blade, his gray eyes calculating every possibility. We need stronger evidence. Financial records, lists of victims, the documents she's kept hidden all these years. Isabella nodded. She knew he was right. But how do we get them? Margaret's estate is heavily guarded. No one gets in or out without clearance. Damien clenched his fists. We need a legitimate way in. And you're the key. She frowned. What do you mean? Margaret is careful, but there's one thing she never refuses: money. If you approach her as a potential investor, She won't suspect a thing. Isabella stiffened. You want me to get close to her? Just long enough for me to break into her office and retrieve the evidence. She inhaled deeply. It was a reckless plan, but it was their only chance. Lifting her chin, she met his gaze with unwavering resolve. All right, let's do it. 2 days later, Isabella arrived at an exclusive high society event hosted by none other than Margaret Ashford. She wore a deep red silk gown, her hair styled into an elegant updo, perfectly embodying the persona of a wealthy businesswoman interested in Margaret's so-called charity work. Margaret didn't suspect a thing. She led Isabella into a private room to discuss a potential investment. Meanwhile, Damien had slipped into the estate through a hidden passage. He moved swiftly through the hallways, making his way toward Margaret's office. With practiced precision, he searched through her drawers, his sharp eyes scanning document after document until he found it. A thick file containing details of illegal transactions, names of children sold off, and the staggering sums of money funneled into Margaret's personal accounts. Got you, you evil bitch, Damien muttered, stuffing the documents into his coat. But just as he turned to leave, a scream shattered the silence. Damien bolted out of the office, his pulse hammering. He reached Margaret's private room just as the heavy doors slammed shut. Inside, Isabella was on her knees, her wrists bound with zip ties. 2 guards stood over her. Margaret loomed above her, her icy blue eyes glinting with triumph. I had my suspicions about you from the start, Isabella. Her voice was smooth but razor sharp. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I've been watching you and Damien for weeks. Isabella clenched her jaw. So what? She spat. You can kill me, but the truth will still come out. Margaret let out a chilling laugh. Oh, I don't need to kill you. I just need you as leverage. She turned to her guards. Take her. The ultimatum. By the time Damien reached the driveway, all he saw was the tail lights of a black car speeding away, Isabella inside. His phone buzzed. He answered. Margaret's voice was calm, deliberate. Damien, if you want to see your wife alive, you will drop this now. He gripped the phone tightly. If you hurt her, I swear. Oh, and what will you do? She mocked. Call the police? You think the police aren't already in my pocket? Damien's body burned with fury. What do you want? He growled. Margaret's voice turned cold. Everything you have, your silence. Walk away from this. Let me continue my work, and I will return Isabella to you. If not, she let the silence stretch. She dies. Chapter 9, The Final Gamble. Damien risks everything. The night wind howled through the streets of London, carrying a chill that seeped into the bones. But for Damien Lancaster, the cold outside was nothing compared to the storm raging within him. He stood before Margaret Ashford's grand estate, his gray eyes locked on the massive doors as they slowly creaked open. He had made his choice. He had nothing left. No company, no fortune, no power. He had given it all to the devil, just to save one person, Isabella. Damien stepped inside, not in haste, not in fear. Tonight he would either save her or die here. Margaret sat elegantly in the lavish drawing room, one leg crossed over the other, her sharp eyes scanning Damien as he entered. So, you actually came, she mused, her lips curling into an amused smile. Damien Lancaster, giving up everything for a woman. Who would have thought? Damien didn't respond. Instead, he placed a thick folder onto the table between them. The entire Lancaster Corporation is now yours. My personal accounts have been transferred into your investment fund. As of now, everything belongs to you. Margaret glanced at the documents and gestured toward a bodyguard. Within seconds, he confirmed the transaction. The funds have been successfully transferred. Margaret arched an eyebrow, crossing her arms. Well, I must admit I didn't expect this. Damien Lancaster, the man who never bowed to anyone, has finally surrendered. What a historic day. Damien remained unmoved. Now, release Isabella. Margaret took a slow sip of her wine, feigning amusement. Do you really think I'll let her go just because I have your wealth? She leaned forward, her voice lowering to a snake-like whisper. You forget who I am, Damien. His fists clenched, but his voice remained steady. Number, I know exactly who you are. A liar who never keeps her word. Margaret's smile faltered slightly. Slowly, Damien pulled out another file from inside his coat. Margaret's expression hardened for the first time that night. Checkmate. Damien placed the second folder on the table and pushed it toward her. You didn't just get my money. You're also getting a very special gift. Margaret flipped open the folder and froze. Her breath hitched. Photographs, transaction records, victim lists, bribed officials. Every piece of evidence Eleanor had gathered before she was murdered, combined with the documents Damien had stolen from her office. Every crime Margaret Ashford had committed, recorded in black and white. Her hands clenched around the papers, her face darkening. Where did you get this? She asked, her voice dangerously low. Damien smirked. I broke into your office the other night. Margaret's jaw tightened. You think you can blackmail me with these scraps of paper? Damien shrugged casually. You could burn them, destroy them. But unfortunately, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. Every single document has already been sent to MI5. Margaret went rigid. The fall of Margaret Ashford. The doors of the estate burst open. Sirens blared outside. Helicopters roared overhead. Margaret whipped around, but it was already too late. A suited government agent stepped forward, his voice firm and authoritative. Margaret Ashford, you are under arrest for human trafficking, money laundering, and murder. She staggered back, turning to Damien with pure fury. What have you done? He stood tall, his face a mask of cold finality. What should have been done a long time ago. Margaret screamed, thrashing as officers seized her. No! You can't do this! The handcuffs clicked into place. Damien no longer cared about her shrieks. He had only one thing left to do. Rescuing Isabella. He raced down to the basement. Isabella! She lifted her head, her wrists still bound to the chair. Damien! He swiftly cut through her restraints and pulled her into his arms. She trembled but managed a weak smile. You gave up everything for me? Damien let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. No. He lifted her chin, his gray eyes locking onto hers. I lost nothing. I found the one thing that matters most. Her breath hitched. And what is that? He whispered. You. The next morning, the world exploded with news of Margaret Ashford's arrest. Her empire crumbled overnight. The justice Eleanor had died for had finally been served. Damien had lost every material possession, but it didn't matter. He had kept the one thing that truly mattered, Isabella. As they stood outside Lancaster Manor, Isabella slipped her fingers through his. Where do we go now? She asked softly. Damien gazed at the horizon, where the first light of dawn painted the sky in gold and crimson. Anywhere, he said, as long as you're with me. And this time, as he kissed her, it was no longer a kiss of duty or bargains. It was a kiss of freedom. Chapter 10. A perfect ending. A gentle breeze rustled through the garden behind Lancaster Manor, carrying the golden glow of the setting sun across the blooming rose bushes. Damien and Isabella sat together on a stone bench, the fragrance of the flowers filling the air with a quiet serenity. Isabella leaned her head against his shoulder, savoring the peaceful moment. But there was one question that had always lingered in her mind, one she had never dared to ask. Damien, she murmured softly, why did you marry me? Damien closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. Do you really want to know? She nodded. He slowly took her hand in his grip firm yet gentle, as if afraid that if he let go, she might disappear. Back then, I didn't believe in love. To me, marriage was nothing more than an agreement, a transaction. Your father was drowning in debt to the Lancaster family, and he came to me, begging for a way out. Isabella swallowed, pain flickering through her chest at the memory of her father's betrayal. I could have refused, Damien continued, but then I saw you. He trailed off, his gaze distant, lost in memories. I don't know why, but for the first time in my life, I felt something different. You weren't like the women in my world, those who only cared about wealth and power. You had compassion, strength. You weren't afraid of me. You fought for what you believed in. I didn't want to admit it, but from the moment I met you, you made me waver." Isabella sat still, her heart pounding. "So, that's why?" Damien shook his head, and for the first time, she saw a tenderness in his eyes she had never noticed before. "No, that's why I married you. But the reason I love you is something else entirely." Damien's fingers tightened around hers, his voice lower, filled with a quiet honesty. "At first I thought you were a burden, just another ornament to my reputation. But over time I realized that it was you who pulled me from the darkness." He paused as if searching for the right words. "I love you because you refused to bow to me, even when you could have surrendered to your fate. I love you because you cared for the orphan children, even when you yourself were abandoned by your own father. I love you because you risked everything to uncover the truth about Eleanor, knowing it could get you killed." Isabella could hear the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her fingertips. "And I knew I loved you when, for the first time, I saw you cry not for yourself, but for me. When I saw the pain in your eyes, I realized you weren't just a part of my life. You were my entire world." A tear slipped down Isabella's cheek. She had always thought of Damien Lancaster as a cold, ruthless man. But at this moment, as he looked at her with nothing but love, she knew she had been wrong. "Damien," she whispered, voice trembling, "I love you too." He smiled softly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you were right to love me." After Margaret's downfall, Damien didn't just rebuild his life. He changed it. Lancaster Manor was transformed into a charity home for orphans, offering sanctuary to children who had once been victims of human trafficking. Standing beside Damien, Isabella helped distribute gifts to the children. "Eleanor would be proud," she whispered. Damien nodded, his gaze distant but filled with quiet determination. "She would be happy knowing her fight wasn't in vain." Isabella squeezed his hand. "And I'll stand beside you, continuing her mission." Damien turned to her, a rare smile playing at his lips. "And I'll stand beside you, always." 2 years later. That spring, Lancaster Manor was no longer a place of loneliness and sorrow. It was filled with light, laughter, and the soft cries of newborns. Isabella sat on the grass, cradling 2 infants in her arms, a baby boy and a baby girl. Damien knelt beside her, his gaze filled with nothing but love. "What should we name them?" Isabella asked, smiling. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face before looking down at their children. "The girl will be Eleanor," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, "to honor the sister I lost." Tears welled in Isabella's eyes. "And the boy?" she asked. Damien thought for a moment before his lips curved into a smile. "Joseph," he whispered, "because you once told me you liked that name." Isabella chuckled. "Did I?" He kissed the top of her head. "Yes, and because I wanted him to carry a name that his mother loved." She gazed at him, overwhelmed with happiness. "Damien, do you know what makes me happiest?" He tilted his head. "What?" She looked down at their children, then back at him. "That we're no longer alone." His grip on her hand tightened, his voice barely a whisper. "Number, from now on, we never will be." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Damien and Isabella stood at the steps of Lancaster Manor, their children in their arms. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming roses through the air. Damien wrapped an arm around Isabella, gazing at the vast sky ahead. "Where do we go from here?" Isabella murmured. A soft smile touched his lips as he whispered, "Nowhere, because we've already found our home." Lancaster Manor, once a place of sorrow, was now a sanctuary of love and hope. And as they walked forward, hand in hand, they knew they would never let go. Thank you for following our story. Did this story touch your heart? Leave a comment below. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel.